حور العين تناديني فدعيني أماه دعيني لتبكي دموعك يا أمي عن دربي لا لن تثنيني حور العين تناديني فدعيني أماه دعيني لتبكي دموعك يا أمي عن دربي لا لن تثنيني.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Let's make dua inshallah with stand. Allahumma ameen. Allahumma anta as-salam wa minka as-salam tabarakta ya dhal jalali wal ikram. Allahumma salli ala sayyidina wa shafi'ina wa habibina wa maulana Muhammad wa barik wa sallam. Allahumma rabbana zidna ilman nafi'a wa amalan mutaqabbala wa rizqan wasi'a wa shifa'a min kulli da'. اللهم ربنا يسر ولا تعسر وتمم بالخير وبك نستعين يا فتاح فسبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Inshallah, we are going to continue on our topic, which is Islam and Muslims in the modern world. And in continuation to this topic, it's very important for us to also bear in mind at all times why discuss this topic and what is its relevance to us as Muslims now. And the benefit of this topic is to really show whether or not, as Western thinkers would think, whether Islam is relevant in the world today or not. And hence, it is important for us to know what is Islam and Muslims in the modern world. So we don't know, for we ourselves to assess how relevant we are to the world. Once they want to know if we are relevant, and we must know whether or not we are in fact relevant. So one, we have to prove ourselves because they are telling us otherwise. And that means we have to come to understand who we are at present. And from our last discussion on this topic, we started last class, we would term that the modern world is really what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with ni'mat and bounties and favors from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That these things are not something different than when the world started in the first place. But all of the elements of the world are the same that we still have till today. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about that in the Quran. Alam tara anna Allah sakhara lakum ma fi samawati wa ma fil ardi wa asbagha alaykum ni'matallah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that whatever is in the heavens and whatever is in the earth, all of it, it is for us to seek from the ni'mat and the bounties of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever is zahiran wa batina, whether these bounties are open to us or whether they are hidden to us, it is the right of every human being to benefit from these favors and these bounties. So the world as we see it today, we had started the discussion that whatever is here, it is nothing except that Allah has provided for us. So being in the world today doesn't mean that being a Muslim does not give us the right to have out of these bounties, but it is further to this, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the ability and the opportunity to recognize the value of the world. And what is the value of the world? The world in itself is created for who? For us human beings to utilize. But the human beings have been created for a special place, and that place is called Jannah, paradise. So there are two things one must recognize: that Allah has created the world for us, because this is where we live, this is our habitat, this is what we know as a world for human beings. There's no other place we could go. Well, no one can say they can drive us Muslims to some planet where we can go and live. There's nothing like that. The fact is that Allah has made this earth for all human beings. So there's no other picture except the picture that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created for every single human being. And we have come to understand out of our discussion thus far that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after granting us and making us aware of this world as it is to us, we have come to know that the modern world that we know today is not modern except that the Muslims were the ones who had contributed towards the advanced world that we live in today. The Muslims are the ones who have contributed towards this advanced world. And we said that during the period of time that Islam had existed in its full fruition and strength, for over 800 plus years, the Muslims had had dominance in leadership over the world. 800 plus years, Muslims had ruled the entire world. And we're talking about a small part of the world, but all of it, Islam had reached every corner. As far as we mentioned, Andalus, Spain, all of it was ruled and controlled by the Muslims. The Roman Empire, the Persian Empire, and we know about these things even when we were discussing the Khulafa'i Rashidin, that during their time, they were already into Persia and already into what? Palestine and into Jerusalem, as we would call that Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu was handed the key of Jerusalem. So these things were known to us that they have reached far and wide already. But during 800 years, they have actually conquered all of these lands and established the deen, and not only the deen, but a way of life that was for all. And the key question was always bear in the back of our mind, why did they make this move? Why did Islam go forward with its deen and the idea of Islam? Because there's one simple hadith, if we even understand the simple hadith that the Prophet ﷺ tells us. It says, "Utlubu ilma walau bis sin." Seek knowledge even if you have to go as far as China. What is the indication? Seek knowledge even if you have to go as far as China. What is the reason? The reason is that the knowledge of deen is not just what we term as ritual practices for us, or what we'll term as what we'll do as worship. But for a Muslim, it is knowledge of every single science. Of every single science. And Islam was built on these principles. And there's a big founding idea that united the Muslims. That united the Muslims and bring the entire ummah together as a nation, because the word really means mother. But in the essence that all of us, if you remember the village life, in a common little small area, we would say that every mother in that village would be a mother to everyone's child. That means that the responsibility of bringing up a child was known to be a village or community issue, not just a parent. So that was a life of community. Islam was designed on community, welfare, and it spread it to every single, from Makkah to Medina, from Medina to the entire Arabian Peninsula, and it spread to North Africa, to all of the lands, because they decided that this was the way forward, that there is unity within human beings. And there's a greater and a better value of life. So Islam taught and showed that it is real, that human beings no longer have to live in tribal lives, fighting and destroying each other. They no longer have to have ways of taking away the rights of other people, but rather an opportunity to serve everyone, and everyone have an opportunity for a better and a happier and a safer environment. This is what Islam went forward with. So subhanallah, Islam went into what? Spain, and brought to it a great success, because there the Muslims met with Jews and Christians, but who worked side by side, with Islam being the leader and the forefront at that point in time in establishing sciences and knowledge that we see today can benefit us. And so we must bear in mind that this is also one of the things that the Prophet ﷺ told us about, that yes, the Muslims will go as far and as wide as they want, and they will exceed in technology. But there's one thing that the Prophet ﷺ also told us that is a reality towards the end of time. And that is narrative of Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, that he said, a time will come, and the hadith was a very lengthy hadith that mentions about Angel Jibreel coming to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam and telling him and asking him. He says, tell me about this and about that, and tell me about Islam and what is ihsan and all these things. And then he says, akhbirni, tell me about the hour. And then he says, what about the hour? He said, tell me about the signs of the hour, meaning the last day, when the time is coming near to an end. He says, then akhbirni, then tell me, O Messenger of Allah, the angel is asking, anil amarati, about the women who will be giving birth to their slave girls. So tell me about the slave woman. He says, Talidu amata rabbataha. She'll be giving birth towards her leader, her boss. And today that's interpreted to mean that she would give birth to a mistress who will become her mother. In other words, the child is ruling the parents or the leaders, the younger ones. وَأَن تَرَى الْعُفَاةَ, and it says that you'll see the barefooted Arab, the urat, the herders, the one who look after the sheep, the goats. These, you'll see them. عَلَى تَرَعَشَاءِ يَتَتَوَلُّونَ عَلَى الْبُنْيَانِ, building lofty towers, tall buildings. One of the signs of the hour. So yes, the Prophet ﷺ told us that this is where we would reach. We would go as far as building amongst the most beautiful things that you could see. And the Muslims no doubt did that. They created so many monuments all over the world. You know, you go to India, one of the famous places you hear about is what? Taj Mahal. Built by whom? Right? Buildings in any corner of the world that you travel that is recognized, built by Muslims. Today, one of the biggest buildings today already overtaken already in Dubai. Some of the tallest buildings built. Now, this is just a sign of the hour, but it tells us of one thing, that the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, not just looking at the building, but looking at the idea of the foresight of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is that Islam would reach there. That the Muslims would reach there. That is the point we have to look at. That we will reach the stage that we have the ability, the technology, the know-how to do all of these things. Subhanallah. That is the bigger picture. That it tells us clearly that the Muslims are not backward people. That the Rasul is saying, you will reach this technology, you will have this ability, the capability of doing all of these things. Subhanallah. يَتَتَوَلُّونَ عَلَى الْبُنْيَانِ, you will be able to build all these tall buildings, without a doubt. So, he is saying to us, without a doubt, that the time has come when that will be, that you will see that the Muslims will grow and reach this stage. What it tells us is that Islam reached there, built this. But what did the world say? Subhanallah. Our evidence for saying this and supporting this is that we should remember, at the dawn of the Renaissance and the Christians in Europe, the Muslims were the ones, at that point in time, they were wearing, the Renaissance, the people who actually started to look at the world as a developed world, at the dawn of the Renaissance, when they actually started to earn wealth and amass wealth, Europe was wearing Persian clothes, singing Arab songs, reading Spanish Muslim philosophy, and eating of Mamluk Turkish brassware. This is the story of how Muslims taught Europe to live well and to think clearly. It's on page 2. At the end of it, it is the story of how Islam created the modern world. It is this story of civilization that Mark Graham described in his book, Who Would Have Thought, and Edgar winning mystery novelist could explain to us in clear, concise language that without Islam, Western civilization as we know it might not exist. So even the West amongst them, Mr. Graham himself acknowledged that without this, Islam would not have existed. Underlying that dramatic proposition is an important thesis, the ongoing debate about a supposed clash of civilization misses the reality that Islam and the West developed from essentially the same roots and, despite their rivalry, helped each other in profound ways along the path of civilization. What is also mentioned that they came from the same root. Christianity, Judaism, and Islam came from the same Semitic religions. Nothing different. They all recognize the prophets of each other, except that some will not believe that that was a prophet of the other one. But they recognize that their forefather being Abraham. Right? They would recognize this. All of them would acknowledge this. But they are all Semitic religions. So what is the fight about? You all work together, you all develop together, And this is where you reach at the peak of your development. In fact, the West and Islam can be viewed as merely different faces of the same civilization. People of the same, people getting prophets who came at different time, but they were the same people. He explained how Arabic-speaking Muslims not only preserved the scientific and philosophical knowledge of the Greeks, but also made it their own, greatly extending and improving on it. For example, the newly developed concept of Andalusia, Spain, philosophy, Ibn Rushd, was found their way into Western universities, where they were viewed and challenges to church orthodox and ushered in the beginning of the scientific methods. This, subhanAllah, explains just what the Western world, some of the writers would tell us about Islam, that this is missing from the West today, the knowledge and the input of Islam and what they had done for civilization. Few of us realize that the present day powerful and prosperous Europe passed through a long historic period called the Dark Ages. Nothing was going on. Even their own language, you couldn't explain Greek and put it across. All of that was done in Arabic and then into Latin. So the Muslims did all the research, compiled all the work. It was exported back, all the way back to Iraq, where the center was, where they actually utilized this knowledge and benefited from it, and brought in people from different parts of the world who study these sciences and knowledge and develop them and then spread them all over again to the world. So the Muslims were working in their corner of creativity. So few of us realized that this is what they went through. They were actually like a country or a state or a group of people or a people who are actually lost without ideas of what to do with what they have. It lasted for more than 1,000 years of stagnation and backwardness, extending from the 5th century after Christ until the Renaissance in the 18th century. They would have remained in that condition were it not for Islam. It was during this period that the Islamic civilization started with the advent of Islam in 610 AC. This period of Islamic history lasted until the beginning of the 20th century. This is when Islam actually had a whole lot of things. The 7th to the 15th century of this period is called the golden era of history. Muslim scientists and other intellectuals ushered in this era with accomplishments that were truly astounding, with developments in all possible areas, including modern medicine, chemistry, and algebra. All of these things were taught by the Muslims, learned by the Muslims, developed by the Muslims, and used for the advancement of the modern world. See, algebra and the language that we learn about today, who look at it, it looks as though it is a French thing. Today's history have canonized it, hidden it so well that it looks like this algebra thing come from France. So if you read contemporary history books, they'll tell you that algebra actually started in France. And this was nowhere to be what? Even found then. And in fact, the Islamic civilization that led Europe out of dark ages into the era of enlightenment and gave rise to the Renaissance. And they were the new pioneer in technology. The fact is that Europe learned the very basic of hygiene and cleanliness from Muslims. Because of the cold weather, bathing was a rarity even among the royalty in Europe, and the stench of the European cities was unbearable. Cleanliness is incumbent on Muslims, and the 5 daily obligatory prayers cannot be said without washing and being clean. But in that time, they did not even have a system, and they had a city, but they did not even have a system. When Muslims went to their place they were living, they did not even have a sewer system. In other words, if you walk on the street and you don't watch where you're going, you could walk on business. This was the condition that they were living under. But when Islam came to them, it brought water from the outside of the city into the city. Right? They didn't have pipes like what we had today, but they developed systems of drains and trenches and pumped the water into it. How they pumped it? They developed the water wheel, which we'll talk about. But prior to this, they had a scarcity of water and how to even get warm water even as well. But it was the Muslims who had developed that idea. So, a talented musician, Ibn Nafi, turned out quite a social dynamo. He reformed the Andalusian, the Spain cuisine and suggested covering their tables with washable cloth, showing them how to dine, how to eat, and chose an order of food to be served. First the soup, the sauces, next the meats, and the last the desserts. All these things were taught by, don't you when you walk into a restaurant, you know how do Western people figure out these things? No, it was taught by Muslims. This multi-course serving became a standard not only in Islamic Spain, but in the entire West. They all use this still today. He even replaced the ostentatious gold and silver goblets with crystal glasses, thus teaching Europeans how to live with style and elegance. Now, whether or not we could contradict this and we could say, well, Islam is a level of humility, but we are showing that Islam had reached this. Prophet that Muslims said that Islam would reach to a certain height, and we have seen that Islam had reached this height, but it was with a warning as well. But leaving the warning aside, we are understanding what we are from what the Rasul said what we would have reached. And subhanAllah, his words came to pass before us, and it's a serious sign of the what? Ending of time. Nonetheless, it proved to us as well with our own living time that we live in, that the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam, without a doubt, what he was saying, that if you live in his time and after 500 years or 300 years after his, that such a thing would happen. It is, you cannot even imagine this. So for the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam to tell us about this, he did not see these things, but it was given to him by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to tell us of what is to come. So he had told us and given us most of the signs of the world. When we did discuss that topic in the past, we would have known that. Ibn Haytham, amongst the great workers of science and knowledge at the time that Islam prevailed, Ibn Haytham in the year 965 to 1040, that area of time close there, also known as Al-Hazin, was an Arab scientist born in Basra, Iraq. Later he moved to Egypt as an adult. Hassan Haytham worked in several fields, but is known primarily for his achievements in astronomy and optics. He was an experimentalist who questioned the ancient Greek works and the Greek works of Ptolemy and Galen. At times, Al-Haytham suggested Ptolemy's celestial model and Galen's explanation of vision had problems. In other words, they were trying to invent the glasses to see properly, but they didn't figure out what to do. The prevailing opinion of the time of Galen's opinion was that vision involved emission of rays from the eyes. An explanation of Haytham cast down upon, he also studied the effects of light refraction and suggested that the mathematics of reflection and refraction needed to be consistent with the autonomy of the eye. He played an important role in the development of optics, experimental physics, theoretical physics, and scientific methods. What he did was, these glasses that we wear, it was his invention that we use till today. Even the phones that we have and all these magnifying things of telescope and all these different things came from his knowledge, who had brought this to us. So all we do is just fine-tune it into different things. But he had already given us their knowledge about these things. So it came from Islam, but yet today it is being hidden from the world, disguised. We also told that the Muslims were the ones who developed the first hospital. We are the ones who developed the first hospital. So hospitals, as we know them now, probably were not present at Europe at this point in time, in that era of history. Muslims first introduced the concept of hospitals. The Caliph of the Islamic Empire built magnificent hospitals in Islam there was generally a moral imperative to treat all the ill regardless of their financial status. And we are told by the Prophet ﷺ of many instances where we have to look after those who are what? Sick. And we should visit the sick. And we should look after their needs. This is part of the life of a Muslim. And we know that a person, Rasulullah tells us, he says, for that one who is sick, فَإِنَّ مَرَضَ الْمُسْلِمِ يَذْهَبُ اللَّهُ بِهِ الْخَطَايَا, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala removes his sins when he's sick. And the person who would travel to visit the sick, every step that he makes towards the direction of visiting the sick, his sins are what? Washed away. These are the rewards for looking after the sick. And the Muslims never just stop and say, we will just visit the sick or look after the sick, but they actually develop a system of taking care of sick people in general, whether you are poor, whether you are rich. Today, if you do not have health insurances in different parts of the world, you will stay on the street and die, because they will not admit you. They will not admit you. Even recent news of today, they mentioned in the news, a woman traveling on an aircraft, she had to stop off in England, and she had to have babies there. When she had the babies, there are certain complications. Now they are asking who is going to foot the bill in England for this. Right? Who's going to foot the bill? Who's paying this? That the government no longer pays for these types of services. It tells us, the level of, even in the modern world that we live in, even a simple situation like this, you are a traveler. You are a traveler. In Islam, such a person will be given free medical attention, taken care of as a guest. Her needs would have been met, and everything in a normal Islamic world with that. And even till today, if you travel to certain parts of the Islamic world, this will not be the case. This will not be the case for us. So the hospitals were largely secular institutions, many of them open to all, male and female, civilian and military, adult and child, rich and poor, Muslims and non-Muslims. They tended to be large urban structures. The biggest hospital of the world in the world of Islam, which at that point in time, which was equipped with all available medical facilities, was built by Azud al-Dawla in 368 AH in Baghdad. The hospital, which with its spacious buildings, up-to-date medical instruments, excellent arrangements, and efficient administration, could rank with the best hospitals built until the middle of the 19th century, was in reality a medical university. So Islam offered that not only to them, but brought it to all of Europe, Spain, different parts of the world. The knowledge and the purpose built and the benefit of hospitals was brought by the Muslims. Why mention these things? Because sometimes we belittle ourselves, not recognizing the fact that Islam has given us this opportunity to do this. And why mention that we do it for everyone, whether you are Muslim or non-Muslims? Because the Quran tells us, it says, لا ينهاكم الله عن الذين لم يقاتلوكم في الدين ولم يخرجوكم من دياركم. That Allah SWT has not prevented us, Muslims. Allah has not prevented us, Muslims, from dealing with those people who, as long as they do not fight you or do not drive you out of your homes, and tabarruhum, that you should be good to them, that you should be kind to them, that you should look after them, wa tuqsitu ilayhim, and that you should be just towards them and fair to them. Inna Allah yuhibbul muqsitin, and Allah loves those who are just and fair. So in Islam, this ayat is found in Surah Mumtahina, verse 8. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us here that it is the duty of a Muslim, once you have taken up that responsibility, you are leaders, whether you are dealing with Muslims or non-Muslims, Muslims deal with everyone. So it shows that Islam has a room for accommodation. Islam never said once you believe in Islam, as we have been told by the West today, in many parts of the world, that Islam, once you do not believe, they will what? Kill you or they'll finish you. No, that's not the case. Because the Quran is telling us otherwise. It is telling us it is for us to be good to them and treat them with justice. So once we take leadership, it is for us to accommodate, live amongst people, whether you are Muslims or non-Muslims. Islam flourishes in every corner of the globe. and continues to grow like this, because Muslims do not live by themselves, but they live with every other religion and race without any of these things. All right, except what we are faced with and challenges of the modern times by the social structure that we are living in. That's a different thing. But to say that Islam and Muslims themselves are different, no, they are not. Because Islam, you are told in Islam by the Quran that we should live with each other with that level of goodness and with that level of trust and being trustworthy with them. Another aspect of Islam that is very important, Muslim colleges or Islamic schools and schools on the whole. The idea of college was a concept which was borrowed from the Muslims' universities. The first college appeared in the Muslim world in the late 600s and early 700s. In Europe, some of the earliest colleges are those under the University of Paris and Oxford. They were founded around the 13th century. These early European colleges were also founded by trusts similar to the Islamic ones, and legal historians have traced them back to the Islamic system. The internal organization of these European colleges was strictly similar to the Islamic ones. For example, so the internal organization of these European colleges was similar to that of the Muslims ones. So the internal organization of these European colleges was strictly similar to the Islamic ones. For example, the idea of the graduate, the sahib, and undergraduate, mustafiq, is, as we have today, Malala's quest for universal education. You know, this type of propaganda that was started amongst us. She even visited our country that, you know, that women were what? Not educated, and they were left out in Islam, and they were meant to be what? Downgraded and kept low because of their way they will dress and with their hijabs and all these different things, and that Muslim men were subjugating women in different ways. This is not what Islam is. It may be some cultural issues, but not what Islam is and what Islam stands for. So while she would have probably said, you know, looking for universal education and all these different things, Islam had already done this in the earlies, right? So education, that quest for education follows in Muslim long and proud history in the field of education. So two Muslim women, Fatima and Miriam Al-Firri, created the world's first university. So it was not men as well, women who built the first university for us in the respect of the sciences. Al-Qarawiyya in Morocco. They had rich families, and they decided to spend their wealth in education. So in secular and religious subjects, at the end of their education, teachers evaluated students and awarded degrees based on satisfactory performances. The concept of awarding degrees would spread from Fez to Andalusia, Spain, and later to the universities in Bologna in Italy and Oxford in England, among other places of learning. 859, for several hundred years, students were schooled here in Pretoria in secular and religious subjects. At the end of their education, teachers were evaluated students and awarded degrees based on satisfactory performance. The concept of awarding degrees would be spread from Fez to Andalusia to Spain, and later to the universities in Bologna and Italy and Oxford, England, among other places of learning. So degrees and all these things you hear about people getting today was things actually what? Done in the early part of Islam as well. So none of these things are new to Islam and to Muslims. The fact is that we are told in the Quran, and we mentioned that hadith before, seeking knowledge, but knowledge is also faridatun ala kulli muslimin, that every Muslim must have the right to seek knowledge. And today that is one of the weakness of the ummah today, that we do not seek knowledge. Knowledge in respect of what? Deen, knowledge in respect of the affairs of the world, knowledge in the affairs of the current aspect of the world. As I say, sometimes we do not even know the affairs in relationship why we are living, the purpose of our living, what is here for us today, what are we supposed to do and function in the world today as Muslims? Where do we go? You know, people come, they can manipulate your mind, they can tell you different things. We are living here presently in the world, all over the world, they are Muslims. So what do? Be Muslims in what way? What is the call of the Muslims today? What do we need to do actively to change the conditions and the mindset that is being bombarded towards us from different types of cultures and organizations and governments that will tell us different things about Islam. And Islam in itself has a rich history. What should we do? And that's a question we should ponder and think about really. Where are we when it comes to our Islam? So Spanish Muslims in Andalusia and Spain were especially strong advocates of education and helped to dispel the gloom that had enveloped Europe during the Dark Ages. Between the 8th and 15th centuries, Andalusia was perhaps the world's epicenter for education and knowledge. Spanish universities such as those in Cordoba, Granada, and Seville had Christians and Jewish students who learned science from Muslims. Women were also encouraged to study in Islam and Muslim Spain. This educational environment that stressed tolerance would not reach the Western world until the 19th and 20th century. But Islam played an important role in education. Right? While today, there's a big difference because what was taught in universities at that time was both religious and secular sciences. Why? Because we believe that Muslims not only look after themselves in the world, but also look after their purpose of living in the world. And that's where the deen comes in. That's where our iman must be studied and understood. What is the purpose of this iman that Allah has given us to believe in Him? What do we do with it? So the knowledge of that is important. And that's why as Muslims we always make dua. And the Prophet ﷺ advised us after the Fajr prayer every morning. It was mentioned from the Zawj of the Rasul ﷺ, Salma radiallahu ta'ala anha. She says that the Prophet ﷺ, Nabi ﷺ, he used to, إِذَا صَلَّى subh, when he would finish perform his Fajr Salah, حِينَ يُسَلِّمْ, when he would finish give salams and do his Darul, he says, his zikr, he would say, Allahumma inni as'aluka ilman nafi'a. Oh Allah, increase me in knowledge, beneficial knowledge. Wa rizqan tayyiban, good rizq and sustenance. Wa amalan mutaqabbala, and in actions that you would accept. In actions that you would accept. Because as Muslims, we drive ourselves forward, but we don't just drive ourselves forward in the world and forgetting what? The hereafter. And forgetting the hereafter. It is part and parcel that as Muslims, we not move only forward in one direction, but we move forward with our iman firstly, and then with the affairs of this world. So yes, we are encouraged to look after and to build ourselves in this world, but not forgetting our iman. So the Persian wheel and water pumps are both Muslim invention. Water flowing through the canals for irrigation and other uses was introduced to Andalusia, Spain, or Spain as we'd say, the present day Spain, by Muslims who actually brought this there. As well as the hammam, the bathrooms that they would bathe in. They didn't have no idea how to get a bathroom to function. So it was the Muslims who actually brought this to them. With hot and cold running water for washing and taking bath. Yes, the Muslims did all of that. Before this, they had problems to even grow food because they didn't know how to get water to their fields. Subhanallah. Out of the invention of the wheel, the water wheel, the idea also came for the invention of how a train should work. Because the wheel also has a straight arm that it uses. And from that straight arm, they actually figure out that the wheel will roll and the arm will actually pull the other one. In that, what we call locomotion that they have, subhanallah, it was out of also the invention of the Muslims. All of this came out from whom? We ourselves who have made these things possible, the Muslims. Why boast about this? No, why say these things? Because sometimes we tell ourselves that what has said out Islam is not really the truth. So from all of this, it seems no one knows the history and little attention is given to it. Little attention is given to the history of what Islam did for the world and what Islam continues to do for the world. A major question can be asked: why does such great works that has changed the way human beings live for the better kept quiet? Why would you want to keep such information quiet? So this is a question we have to answer ourselves, and this will tell us what the world is today. Why would you want to keep this level of information quiet? And why would you want to keep these type of people who had this type of ability? In other words, if you had people like this to work for you or to help you to develop, what would you do with them? In other words, they're the people who actually were skilled. So the best of people. If you ask yourselves, when the crusade started, what did they do with these scientists? What happened to them? Where were they? What happened after that? And then we'll come to realize that they didn't finish over with them, but they kept them as their prized possession to continue infrastructural work, scientific work, continuously while they had their success. So, inshallah, we'll continue at that point in time and look now as to why this is kept quiet, and is it that the West totally does this, or there are people in the West who actually show that yes, this still exists till today. So inshallah, in our next class we're going to look at the aspect of what the West thinks of the Muslims in the world that we live in today. Let's make dua, inshallah, we close. Allahumma ameen. Allahumma anta as-salam wa minka as-salam, tabarakta ya dhal jalali wal ikram. Allahumma salli ala sayyidina wa shafi'ina wa habibina wa maulana Muhammad wa barik wa sallam. اللهم ربنا يسر ولا تعسر بالخير بك نستعين يا فتاح. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
حور العين تناديني فدعيني أماه دعيني، لتبكي دموعك يا أمي عن دربي لا لن تثنيني. أماه طريقي قد وضحى والقلب يسير به فرحا، حرب وجهاد متقد ودم بالعزة قد نضحا. حور العين تناديني